Good evening. As you might be able to tell, the lighting is a little bit different today, and I also have a little bit of different information for you. It's April 28th, and it's been 5 days since my last data update. I want to do a quick update as some states relax. I don't expect to see big changes from this update, but it is interesting because I see some changes that seem to be worth reporting. And I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that we need to talk about this information and talk about it repeatedly with not every day, but every week. And so this is my way of doing that. I'm going to try to go through this quickly with the other videos that you can see as my as sort of reference point for this. As you all know, I do these drop-off graphs. I want to say again and again, I did not come up with these graphs. I think they're a brilliant idea that was come up with at this site right here, described it by the Minute Physics. The one thing about them is you can actually plot out your own graphs by going there. If you have a question about how a certain country is doing or things like that, go to this site and enter that country in, and you'll be able to see, oh, that country is kind of there in the middle of things. This is a really good plot because up is bad, down is good, flat is you don't know what's going on. And so you can see that we have Taiwan and Hong Kong way over here on the left, and they have definitely dropped off. And you might remember hearing some news stories about how Hong Kong has another wave. Those might have been true for a day or two, but according to this graph right here, that wave was small, and they're still dropping. You can see that Taiwan had even a blip that pushed it up, but then they went down again. And so you can see that there's all sorts of things going on. Singapore is in the middle of the pack right now, which is bad for them because they used to be way down on the plot. But also at the same time, they seem to be following the same path that other people have followed. The US, by the way, if you look very closely at that line, if you squint a little, you might be able to see it is actually flattening out. That's a good thing, and we hope to see more of that. But the thing about the US is we're basically a collection of 50 large regions, some larger than others, but we definitely are such a big country that it's not as helpful to look at us as an entire country. We want to look region by region. And that's what I want to give you the graphs that do right here. There's mixed ups and downs that I can show you. If you had asked me what I thought different states would do, I probably would have gotten it half right. The one state that I care about most is the one that I live in right now, and the one that I know best, I would have predicted that would continue to go down. The good news is Washington has continued to go down. Everything else seems to be sort of a mixed bag, but the thing about mixed bags is they're also not terrible. You know, the glass is half full, so you might be able to say it's half empty, but you can't say it's 25% full, okay? It's half full and things are going up and down. The one other message I want to get across, New York City is uniquely hard hit. That whole region is a black swan event in our country. Why is it that way? We don't know yet. But all I want to do is I want to report on these graphs that New York City, and I thank goodness for this, right? Because it's so terrible in New York City. You have like 1 out of every 600 people have died in New York City. And they need help. We can give help because it looks like other parts of the country can give help to them. And that's the point that I want to make. So let's get to the graphs. Again, this probably looks pretty similar, and this looks like a bunch of rainbow Play-Doh that's been extruded and thrown out onto that graph right there, a bunch of spaghetti. But if you look a little bit past the colors, you can see that as before, the two gray lines, I've made New York for the Granite State, and New Jersey similar colors because they're both gray, and you see that they're way up on the far end of that. Before I was noticing that New York had actually come down. Now it's sort of bouncing back up again. It's sort of flattening out just a little bit, but you can see that's really just an uptick relative to the entire thing. But at least it's flat, and at least it's not exponentially growing anymore. We appear to be definitely past the middle of the wave with New York, and hopefully with New Jersey too, although you see that New Jersey is more flat. Now I've thrown another bunch of states up there this time, and the one thing I want you to look at on this graph though, remember the one thing you're looking for is where are places going down? Where can you see it ducking out from the crowd and ducking down under the other ones? And you can see that the purple line, Louisiana, And the green line, Washington, the Seahawks color line, by the way, is King County, Snohomish, the two counties where Seattle is. All three of those lines are jumping out as dropping down on this chart really fast. That is the good news. I'm not even zooming in from New York yet. Let's look around the U.S. and let's look at the different regions. So in the Northeast U.S., again, we have New York and New Jersey. And probably my most worrisome piece of news is I took a look at Massachusetts. And you can see that Massachusetts is not quite as sharp of a slope, but it's still going up. It may be flattening now, but we're not really sure. Massachusetts is being hit hard. If you look at Rhode Island, it's definitely a much smaller line, and that will show up as being smaller on this graph. But remember, we're looking at the slopes, how things are going up or down. And Rhode Island seems to be going up. DC is sort of bouncing around. It looks like it was going up, but at least DC seems to be flattening out. These are the worst places that I can find, and definitely Massachusetts. You put that on your list as we need to keep an eye on. We need to see what kind of help they need. Let's move around to the SEC. And again, because I'm from the SEC, I sort of know the team colors. I've tried to color these things by team colors. And so you have the Florida Gators. Sorry, Seminoles, but I'm a Florida Gator. And so I have the orange and blue for Florida. The good news when I see this is, again, we see Louisiana continuing to drop off the cliff. Good in this case. Florida is actually trending down still. And you might remember they opened the beaches like a week ago. Well, as far as cases go, they seem to actually be going down, not staying flat. Georgia as well is more flat. I don't want to call that going down yet. And again, flat could be because they're not testing enough. So you don't really know, but you do know that things aren't exponentially horrible there, okay? You know that they could be masking some badness, some exponential growth of this, but it's not the hugely multiplying exponential part of the curve that they're doing. We got to keep an eye on this because they do start to go up after a while. You'll notice that Tennessee and Kentucky are both sloping upwards right now. And so that's the bad news part of this graph and the mixed bag. Notice how they were flat and now they're going up at that slope. And again, it's the slope that's the issue. You want to stay away from that slope taking you too far up the curve. If you're flat, at least you're not going up the curve. It's that kind of thing. So I'm a little worried about Kentucky and Tennessee. I'm not as worried about Georgia as I thought I would be, but that might be an artifact of testing. And if you must say, my pleasant surprise is that Florida seems to be genuinely going down at this point. Move to the middle of the country. We've got Wisconsin this time. I added on to Texas and Michigan. Texas and Michigan we were worried about. We had an outbreak in Detroit. We had the Texas line where there was questions about how much should they be testing. And notice that they're both sort of curving up a little bit. And so there's some reason to worry and look out for that, but I wouldn't worry too much until we see those lines starting to go up more, especially if the volume of tests is increasing. Unfortunately, I don't have those numbers on my graph. I could actually look them up, and I'm just realizing that right now, but this is already a long enough video. So maybe in the next video, I'll have some kind of measure of how test volume is increasing. Wisconsin is bouncing up at an upward slope. That is what I'm worried about. Okay, so again, Michigan and Texas flat, Wisconsin worrisome. And now back to the West Coast again. Once again, the line that I've been looking at closest for the longest is the green line, Washington State, and it is continuing to go down. We had some kind of weird bouncing around, and if you look at the data, that's all in the reporting of the data. The weird bouncing around that I commented on last time with Washington. On this plot, that sort of washes out that bouncing around, and you can see that it's clearly coming out as dropping. So that's the good news. The thing that surprised me unpleasantly here is that Colorado, which was flat before, is now going up. You see those little brown sort of mountains for the mountain state of Colorado. And Colorado is going up. That's worrisome because they relaxed restrictions and then they're going up like that. At the same time they relaxed restrictions, Georgia did almost the same thing. And I would have picked Georgia to be doing this, and then we see Colorado doing this. There's a lot of things we don't understand about what happens where. And so that's why my main message is we've got to keep an eye on this. It's possible that this uptick in Colorado is from increased testing, and I hope that that's the case. But we don't know, and we don't know how long it's sustained. Again, it's not leaping up, it's just going up. And so there's that. And then California, I've said before, California just has some weirdnesses in how they report the data. They've reported backlog data. The sites have to go back and change it, and they all do that inconsistently. And so California is kind of bouncing around. And so you see here it's flattish but sloping up. But again, I'm going to say flat is flat. It's up flat, you know? And because it's not increasing like New York was increasing. Again, keep an eye on it. I wish that the data was cleaner, but it's a messy world and messy data. The best way to look at this is not to look at it every single day, but to look at the whole course of the curve in a drop-off plot like this. This way you can see the whole shape of the data, and you can see, oh, that's just an uptick. Oh, that's going up slightly. Oh, that's going up a lot. And so you can see that Washington is going down a lot. Oregon, on the other hand, is flattish going down. And so that's on the good side of being flat. And all I can say is, again, I see nothing in this to convince me that the West Coast in particular is any different from what I said last time. Again, the surprise to me is Colorado. So a few unpleasant surprises, but look at the scale of that size. That is worrisome, but it's also not shooting up like New York did. So we're caught in between. You know, the data doesn't necessarily make everything clear, but hopefully we can step back and we can say Washington and Louisiana look real as far as how they are dropping off relative to every other place. And that drop-off is reflected in the metropolitan area of Seattle with the Seahawks colors right there. Can you tell I miss my Seahawks? I'm basically going to put their colors on just so I can see the colors on a screen. So just remember, this virus takes weeks to play out. But now that we've had another half of a week, I can say that Washington and Louisiana, my main good surprises, are still good surprises. They're still looking good. I've got some new things to worry about. The data gives you a few new things to worry about. I'm a little worried about Colorado. And I'm a little bit worried about people saying that that comes from them opening up. I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure because Georgia opened up too, and we don't see them going up the same way. We've got to look at all the states that we can get data from and try to separate this out regionally to say, what is the virus depending on? And I just want to say again, yeah, be careful interpreting data from California. We need that data. I wish it could be split up by county, honestly, by California, but that would introduce even more noise. So let's keep an eye on these places. Massachusetts in particular, we need to be very careful around that state because it's beginning to look a bit like New Jersey, which looks like New York. But that's the only place that I can see that really gives me worry that it has the large numbers. Percentage increases don't matter as much if they're small numbers. You're going to get large percentage increases if you have only 2 cases in the first place. So there are some states that are going up high on a percentage-wise basis that we need to keep an eye on, but we really can't apply the same standard to them as we can to a populous state like Massachusetts with a lot of people and a lot of cases. And so what do we do with these data? I want to say, let us know the data as a population, and let's set some standards. And the standards shouldn't be set on day-to-day data. They should be set on week-to-week data. I actually like what I heard is being tossed around by New York as conditions for relaxation. An R0 of less than 1.1, and by the way, flat is probably around an R0 of 1, although again, you can't be sure about that flatness. Definitely where you see Washington decreasing like it's decreasing, that's definitely less than 1. And hospitals 70% full. I like this because we need to keep an eye on the hospitals. But you might have noticed I'm not showing you hospitals graph. By the way, Snohomish hospitals, they're doing fine. The hospitalizations seem to be lingering longer than I expected, but they're still well under capacity. I would guess that they meet this standard of less than 70% full. So by New York standards, I believe Washington State should be relaxing soon. By other standards, we should go state by state. R0 depends on testing being full and consistent, so it depends on having a lot of tests and running them the same way, not suddenly dumping a bunch of test results in and saying, oh, I've got a bunch of new cases, or like I'm worried is happening in some states, not testing and then saying, oh, I don't have any cases because I'm not testing. We need to test, and we need to test consistently, because from that we can see whether we're on the exponential part of the curve or not, or whether we're dropping off like Washington and Louisiana. And so my big thing I want to advocate for, hospital data should be made as public as possible. I realize that this is really complex, and you can't get too granular on the data because you don't want to compromise privacy. But if we're all in this together, the thing that we should all be keeping an eye on, most of all, is how are the hospitals being used? And again, we can and should be careful about that, because if we enter an exponential growth phase, the hospitals could get overwhelmed. But we've got to keep an eye on that. And as an informed populace who's being asked to support and vote for people based on the decisions they make with this data, I want to see these data. Good news is, I finally found the data, and I had to basically go to a UK newspaper to get it. I am really kind of surprised that the only place I found this, and maybe there's somebody else who's done this, but the place where I found it was from the Financial Times. It gives a week-on-week change in the number of people hospitalized for COVID-19 in different U.S. states. It has Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York, and you see even New Jersey and New York, you have blue reductions in the number of people hospitalized week by week. Good news, the hospitals are having room. Louisiana is in the upper corner up there, and that is also good news, and you can see that I've said that looks good, and it looks good on this graph too. I would love to show you more of these graphs, but I haven't found them yet. And so I will show you them if I find them, and hopefully I don't have to go to another country to get these data. I want to say to the U.S. media and the U.S. politicians, make these data available to us, because we can see it, and then we can say, oh, Connecticut is only just now getting into the reduction phase. We have to be more careful in Connecticut. New York is reducing, but they've been hit by such a wave. What do they need as far as PPE? What do they need as far as pharmaceuticals and things like that? We can't just say we're in the reduction phase, so let's open everything up. But we can at least say it's part of the puzzle of what we need. And I want to say that I believe that people will do this if they are informed. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's one of the things that's stressing everyone out. And so I want to do my bit by just trying to put the information out there as I see it. These are always through my spectacles, right? But I want you to be able to make your own decisions about the publicly available data. And I think the drop-off plots are a great tool to be able to do that. Here's the thing about China, which is definitely a month or two ahead of us on the curve. And they've opened up and they have their factories running again. But their economy is not off the ground. Notice that it's not just the government controlling the economy, not even in China. The consumers decide where to spend. And if the consumers don't feel safe, the consumers won't go out and spend. And that's the main thing. We've got to get our eye off of spending. We've got to get our eye on the consumers, and not even the consumers, the citizens and the people. I don't even want to use that word. The consumer word is a bad word for me to use. I want to say that people are going to make these decisions, and let's use the data. I'll talk about what I see in the data, and if you disagree with me, point to that part of the data that you disagree with, or say that these data are bad because this state isn't doing as much testing. And then I will agree with you, if you're making a good point. Give us the information, let us choose what to do, and many will stay home, as the Chinese are staying home still. So I want to say that it's not just all about what does the governor decide, what does the president decide. It's what do you decide. And if you are afraid and you don't trust the data, okay, you might be right or wrong. But I'm going to respect your ability to make that decision. And I'm going to want to let you take these data and do with them what you will. It reminds me of a line, and you probably know this movie. It's not known for its deep political analysis, but supreme executive power does derive from a mandate from the masses. I'm going to be kind of American in my political outlook there. It does not derive from some farcical aquatic ceremony, and it does not derive directly from science. You always have to interpret the science. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm putting on my lenses. I'm saying that these places look good. Let's check back in another half a week or so, and let's see how it goes. All right, everyone. I hope you have a good evening, and I hope that your state turns around and drops off quickly. May you drop off to sleep well tonight.